So bounded thinking and bounded rationality is a new model of rationality which shares a lot with maximizing model, but differs in important ways regarding the method, regarding practicality, regarding acknowledging our limitation. So you have come halfway now to a new conception of rationality. Does it make sense what I say about procedural rationality and its departure from the standard maximizing rationality? Okay, let me give you an example. You want to sell your house. Okay, there are two options. Okay, if you want to understand, are you a maximizing person or a procedural person or satisficing person? Okay, there are two ways to sell your house. First, consider the options, all possible options, the maximum price you can get for your house, and act as though or in such a way that you should get that one, the maximum price. And assume that what you want is the maximum price. I ignore all other cases to make this case simple. Okay, this is one model. This is maximizing. The second model, I do not consider all options. I do not consider the maximum price. I have a satisfactory level for myself. If I sell it 500,000, I'm satisfied. The first buyer offers 500,000, I sell it. I may gain $100,000 more if I wait 1 week, but I don't for other reasons. For example, I want to move. So I have some limitations. I want to move. I change my perspective. I cut down the hypothesis. I cut down all possible outcomes. I do not consider all of them. I don't aim at getting the maximum. I set a threshold for myself. As soon as I get that one, I'm done. It's the question. If you think the second way is a rational way of doing that, you are a follower a satisficing model. If you think the first way of doing that is the rational way to do that, you are following a maximizing model. Just to give you a sense of the difference. There are different ways of thinking about rationality, even in the narrow context of instrumental rationality, in the narrowest context of instrumental rationality, because instrumental rationality can be taken in different ways. Are we good now? Are you following?
It's a very good statement. There are different ways to think about rationality, even within the narrow limitations of instrumental rationality.
Yeah, good. So I made one good sentence. That's improvement for me. Believe me. Okay. 10 minutes for the first break? Good. Okay, did I introduce ideas of rationality I aimed at? I didn't talk about group rationality. I didn't talk about scientific rationality. I didn't talk about information. I didn't talk about probabilities. You don't like probabilities, do you? Probabilities. Yeah. Okay. We come back to them. Okay. Let me tell you what. In 10 minutes, what is the most important thing I have to tell you about ideas of rationality? Okay. I have lots of things to say, but let me come back. Okay. One thing. I said instrumental rationality in one phase or another is working in many different domains. Come back to science. People talk about scientific rationality. What does it mean, scientific rationality? I'm talking about very different and settled concepts in a very shallow and vague way. So I'm just trying to give the picture. The details do not matter now. So scientific rationality may have many different senses, but distinguish between two things. Once we are talking about rationality in science, and once we talk about rationality of science. In the first sense, rationality in science, we look at things in science which can be described as rational or not. Okay, I said things in science. What are the things in science which can be described as rational or irrational? I have two examples. Theory choice. So you have alternative theories. You want to choose one over the other. Quantum theory, relativity theory, I don't know. How to do that? You need a method. Okay, I'm misleading you. Do scientists really choose between theories? I don't know. It appears they do. It appears they do. If it is the case, then perhaps theory choice is not a scientific matter, pure scientific matter. It's meta-scientific. In that sense, you need a conception of rationality. Or you have different forms of data, you want to analyze them. How to do that? We have different scientific methods, but how to choose between them is a meta-scientific matter. So you need conception of rationality which is formulated, which is talked about. Or it's better to talk about it in terms of rationality in science, though the concept itself is not pure scientific. It's a meta-scientific conception, but it's used in science. In other cases, you talk about rationality of science or rationality of a particular discipline within science. These are two different conceptions. When you talk about rationality of science, I think you need a different conception, different standard of rationality first, and then you should use that different conception to evaluate rationality of science. Example, if you are instrumentalist about rationality, not in a narrow sense, in a broad sense, not as broad as we talked about, but in an intermediate level, in the sense that science can have goals, epistemic goals, practical goals. Epistemic goals might be to, I don't know, achieve truth, if you are realist. Okay? These problems all are linked to other problems, philosophy of science and other things. If you are not realist, perhaps you do not believe in such a name for science. If you are Van Frassen, you will never find science as describing truth in the word. Okay, but if you think of science this way, that science has some goals, epistemic, practical, then you can talk about rationality of science using your instrumental conception of rationality, which is fulfilling, reaching these goals, and the methods of science. You compare them and talk about rationality of science. This is a different conception of rationality from the one I talked about, rationality of theory choice. So you should distinguish between these concepts. Different ways to understand rationality. Rationality in science, I would say, because compare the classical example, the debate between Hempel and Popper. Are we trying in science to confirm theories, or no, we are trying to falsify theories? Okay. Well, this is not a scientific discussion, definitely. It's a philosophy of science, but it's about rationality in science. It's about how scientists try to make scientific theories, by confirmation or by falsification. Well, we know today, today we know that by neither of them. There are two oversimplified models. But just a good example of what is rationality in science. The debate, rationality in science is not in science, it's philosophical. But it's about how scientists in science rationally work. Okay. One more thing that's important is I want to talk about one important theorem in group rationality. Where is that? Okay, group rationality. So let me tell you this, and then I sum up. Okay. I talked more in this first session about rationality as though rationality is a property of a single thing. It's a property of person. Person is rational. It's a property of action, single action. Property of belief, a single belief, or so on and so forth. Now think about rationality as a property or attribute of a group. There's a different angle. So you have an individual. The individual, whatever standard of rationality you have, may be rational. Now you have a group of individuals. The question is this: can you use the same conception of rationality you had for the individual to talk about the rationality of the group of the individuals, of the members? And bad news for instrumental rationality is that in 1963, Arrows proved that this extension in general is not possible. You cannot use the methods in probabilistic calculus that we have regarding rationality of individuals, expanding them in a straightforward way to get rationality for groups. It doesn't work. An example? Assume that you have, we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I counted you two. We are 10 scientists here, assume, we are not. Some of you are, but I'm not. So, we are 10 scientists here. Each of us is rational according to our favorite instrumentalist conception of rationality. If all of us focus on one single issue, using all resources to solve that issue, our group as a whole is not rational, because we're wasting our resources. So it seems that there are other items going on to decide about rationality of group more than instrumental rationality about individuals. So group rationality is a different story. And in that sense, rationality of science might be a totally different story than rationality in science, or that each scientist is using rational way of thinking or not. They may all use, but science as a whole might not be rational. So the new horizon of distinguishing between individual rationality and group rationality is a result of works like Arrows. And I want to stop here and just sum up what we have done in this session. We tried to introduce some conceptions of rationality. We talked about maximizing self-interest. We talked about more general form, maximizing utility. We talked about a new debate about the plausibility of standard maximizing framework in terms of bounded thinking and bounded rationality and satisfying in the scientific context. At the end, I just came back and said that there is another layer of discussion, which is about the bearer of rationality, let's say. Whether it is individual or group, it may change the whole conception of rationality we are talking about. Let me stop here and then we come back to the next session. Thank you. By the way, what I talked about last session mainly was based on Weyrich and Paul Taggart views. So I was reviewing their views. What I'm going to talk about now is just a critical review of a forthcoming book. It was published, I guess, on Amazon on January 13th, 2013. You can check it out. It just came out a couple of weeks ago by Adam Morton, titled Bounded Thinking. It now should make sense, some sense at least, that what they are doing. I will try to talk about the debate, contemporary debate in analytic philosophy about rationality. So this is the book that I will focus on. Okay. first an overview of negative and positive points that Adam Morton has to say. The negative side goes like this. We are dealing with very hard problems. And hard problems are problems that we cannot solve them individually, and perhaps we cannot solve them collectively as well. But at least they are hard enough that we cannot solve them individually. So we try to manage them collectively. Managing is a sorry. No. Thank you. To manage, to solve these problems, we need to collaborate. And we are limited in many different ways. The standard idea is that there is a way of systematic thinking that can explain how to solve these problems collectively. And rationality is understood as kind of understanding-based oversight on our thinking. So there are different methods going on. The problems are hard enough, we cannot solve them individually. We should collaborate to solve them. So we should manage our resources and tools to approach the problems. And there is a kind of oversight over what we are doing. If this oversight is of the right sort, we are rational. And we can succeed in solving the problem. If not, we are irrational, or we are not rational. Morton's basic claim is that there is no such a thing. So keep in mind, we are not talking about low-level standards of rationality. By low level, I mean standards like maximizing utility, maximizing self-interest, satisficing. Well, satisficing is a bit different, but it's still at that in this lower level. So we are talking about rationality as kind of oversight that by one of these conceptions, we can get it. And if we can get it, we can use that unifying oversight to solve our problems. Morton's claim is that there is no such a thing. So in a sense, Morton's claim is revolutionary, is nihilist claim in a sense, is nihilist regarding such a unified concept. Morton, Adam Morton. M-O-R. Yeah, M-O-R-T. It is, and the book is this one, Bounded Thinking, Intellectual Virtues for Limited Agents, by Adam Morton. Adam Morton was, Ezra, if I'm right, Adam Morton was at Princeton for a while, wasn't he? Yeah. He was. Yeah, he was not your. He was my, because he came to my university, and I was his RA for a while. I remember he said, I was in Princeton before that teaching. I think at the same. I'm not sure which, but I think he was there with David Lewis. They were there at the same time. So it was. Okay, so anyway, okay, so this is the negative side. It's kind of nihilism regarding standard conception of rationality. What is the positive side? So I'm just making long story short now, okay, and then come back and try to fill the gap. Okay, so we need rationality. We needed rationality actually. So we needed to have some kind of oversight on our piecemeal processes of thinking, methods of thinking, to guide us. This oversight to guide us how to reach the goal. Okay, so if there is no such unifying concept of rationality, what else should do the job? What else is the guidance to approach the problem? The idea is that this idea is partly coming from what has been defended in 90s and 20s under the title of virtue epistemology. I'm not sure if the term sounds familiar or not. Is there anyone here finding the idea familiar? Okay. This is not really anything sophisticated. Many people came to think, what is the idea of virtue epistemology? After debates, epistemology concerns with what is knowledge, among other questions. Okay, people have started thinking about, what is the main ingredient of knowledge? You have heard about Getty's problem in the sense that, is knowledge justified true belief or not? Okay, and Getty came up with some examples with, if you can be justified, you can have true belief, but still you have no knowledge. So Getty's problem came out, and then people started how to handle the issue. They divided into two main camps, internalist, externalist. Internalists thought that knowledge is an internal state. At the end of the day, you get knowledge if you have justified true belief, in addition to something internal. Externalists came down to the idea that no, there is nothing significant internal to the knowledge. Knowledge is something external matter. Knowledge, the arch example is perception. And perception might be successful even though you're not justified in the traditional sense of what you're perceiving. Okay, forget that. What is a virtue epistemology? Virtue epistemology thought that, we believe different things. The question is how these different beliefs become knowledge. What should be added to the beliefs to become knowledge? You say truth, you say justification, you say account, whatever. Virtue epistemologists say, wait a moment, for a belief to have a normative status, to become knowledge, the belief holder, the believer, should have some characteristics. Some epistemic characteristics. In fact, the belief holder should exhibit some virtues, epistemic virtues. If the belief holder is equipped with enough of these virtues, the belief itself is knowledge. If not, it is not. Keep in mind, you need truth. So it's not kind of relativism. The belief should be true. The debate is what else you need. If you have a true belief, virtue epistemologists say, if the belief holder possesses some epistemic virtues, the true belief, is knowledge, is a piece of knowledge. So, compare this with Aristotelian notion of morality. An act is right if the one who performs the act has some characteristics, virtues. In that case, you are talking about moral virtues. So, sorry, can I have the napkin, please? Thanks. Excuse me. So, the idea of virtue epistemology is something like this. The normative characteristics of beliefs that let belief become knowledge supervene on the normative characteristics of the agent. By normative characteristics, we mean of the agent. We mean things like intellectual virtues or epistemic virtues. Let me give you an example. If you have a true belief to know whether your true belief is knowledge or not, look at the virtues. By means of them, in virtue of possessing them, you have gained that belief. If, for example, they are based on, if the belief is based on virtues like this, sensitivity, carefulness, open-mindedness, considering alternatives, providing enough evidence, and so on and so forth, the belief is knowledge. Keep in mind, the belief is true. If not, even if your belief is true, if you have not been sensitive, if you have not been open-minded, if you have not been careful enough, even if the true belief is practically useful, you do not possess knowledge. Okay. So we do not talk about epistemology here. I'm just trying to explain the status of virtue epistemology within the debate of externalism, internalism, about the nature of knowledge. Okay. So this is the origin of epistemic virtues. I was talking about the positive side of Morton's view. Morton is nihilist about unified conception of rationality. Okay, what's instead of that? He thinks epistemic virtues. We should think of thinking in terms of virtues. What makes thinking rational is not following, maximizing utility, self-interest, or anything else. What makes thinking rational is to be entertained, to be done, to be performed by virtues, by epistemic virtues. I'm distinguishing between epistemic virtues and moral virtues, not saying that they do not overlap. Okay? I just want to have the conceptual distinction. How to talk about the relationship is a different story. Okay. So, what is a virtue? Virtue is defined in terms of the result rather than the way you achieve it. So the virtue of being patient, for example, is mainly characterized in terms of the result of the person who possesses that virtue. He or she is patient. It does not pay attention, the concept, does not pay attention to how the person instantiate, realize that virtue. Okay, so virtue itself, I'm not saying that the way is not relevant. I'm just saying that the virtue in its characterization is result-oriented. So the virtue of being patient was perhaps has both moral and epistemic side, but the virtue of being, for example, sensitive, in epistemic sense, is a virtue, an epistemic virtue. It means that if you are a sensitive person in an epistemic way, if what you believe, you are sensitive to what you believe, in the sense that if what you believe were false, you would not believe it. You are sensitive in that sense. Or you are open-minded as a virtue if you are ready to consider counter-evidence. Look, all these virtues are characterized in terms of some particular state, some particular result that should be exhibited, that shows that you have that, someone has that virtue or not. So virtues, moral or epistemic, this is my result, are characterized in terms of the result. The positive side of this view says that for thinking